'cause you have set me free. There is no greater love, no greater love than this.
All right, Roger, thank you so much again for taking the time to letting me kind of pick your brain a little bit and, you know, ask you questions and all of that good stuff. So to start off, just, you know, give us your name and where you're from.
I am Roger LaVisca, and I was born and raised in Wisconsin. I moved when I was a junior in high school. I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, my senior year. And this has been home for, oh my Lord, 30-something years now, 35 years. Yeah.
That's amazing.
What
was it like?
Love this area. Love this area here.
What was it like moving from Wisconsin, which I know is very cold, to where you are now?
Well, it's you had to learn to make friends really, really fast. Both of my parents are ministers growing up. They both graduated from Rhema Bible College in Oklahoma. So what they would do is I think it was sixth grade, we were in Illinois. They would start a church and get it going, and they felt led to go to another place and start a church. So I'd be there for a year, maybe 2 years. So you had to learn to make friends really, really fast. You had to kind of be, I don't want to say the class clown, but you had to be someone that engaging. And you couldn't be the wallflower. You would never had any friends. So I learned to make friends really, really fast. Yeah.
Do you also feel like that had kind of an effect on you, not just making friends, but also having routine or feeling like you couldn't get a grasp on things? Or did you feel like you were able to get grasp?
No, I'm also prior military, and something they taught us there was to adapt and overcome. And that's something I did at a very, very early age when I didn't even know about the term. You learn to adapt and overcome really fast. Otherwise that, or you're a loner. And I had a younger brother who about 3 years younger, and then a younger sister about 5 years younger than me. So it was either just us or, you know, didn't have any friends. So you had to learn to adapt and overcome. And that's been kind of a motto for quite some time, adapt and overcome.
And how do you think growing up with parents who are in ministry affected your relationship or walk with God? Would you say that you knew him at an early age, or you knew of him at an early age?
I think I knew him early. I got to see a lot of prominent people like Kenneth Copeland and Kenneth Hagee and Joyce Meyer. I got to meet a lot of those people when I was a kid. So, and a lot of those people have been in the industry for many, many, many years. And they know my parents, and I knew them. So, I mean, it was kind of neat. It was kind of fun to be around them. And we always had a joke when we were kids, though, that we were always, it was always the deacon's kid, because we would always, I'm trying to think of the saying we always said. It was because we always hung around with the deacon's kids. We always blamed the deacon's kids rather than us getting in trouble. So
yeah.
The pastor's kids did no wrong, is what we would say. It was always the deacon's kids.
Oh, wow. And so what was that like growing up in that type of atmosphere at that age?
When I look back on it now, I didn't realize how much I hate to say the word loathe. Every time the church door opened, we were there. Because we were either helping in the nursery, because we were kids, and, you know, we were there to help get the church going and to build up churches. And every time the door opened, it didn't matter. We were there because we were too young to stay home. And I don't know, you got to the point where I resented it. And it's kind of like the prodigal story. You kind of leave for a while and you realize this is where I find peace, and there's no anxiety and no stress. And my walk with God, it didn't like go into an awful direction with drugs and anything like that, or abuse, or it didn't go in a really bad direction. It just stopped communicating for quite some time. And I'd say over the past maybe 6 years, it's gotten really, really strong.
Wow.
And I always knew of God, and I believed that way. But just I'd say over the past 6 years, it's gotten to a place where like he's in the car with me. We have conversations. It's nice. I'm in a good place in my life.
Yeah, and he's become more of like your friend than just this.
My cornerstone, my foundation, and I have pillars, and those are I always tell people that the 5 people you hang around the most is who you become, and I have about 9 of these pillars, and I call them usually once a month and just tell them, thank you for being a cornerstone on my foundation. And they know my cornerstone, my foundation's God. So it's nice to have those people that help to hold me to a higher level than I hold myself.
Keeping you accountable. That's
100%.
amazing. That's amazing.
100%.
And I know, Roger, you're an incredible speaker. You have your Motivational Mondays, and you seem not to miss a beat. So that's incredible. Talk to me about how you landed doing that. Like, how did you become a speaker? Would you have guessed that you were always going to be a speaker, or is this something that you discovered?
I'm trying to think of what episode. Like, we just did 219, so this is the start of the 5th year, every single Monday. And it's just something I felt like I needed to do and needed to share, and wasn't really looking for a platform. And I don't ever look for the views and the likes and the hearts and things like that. I pick a word, I pick a topic, and try to spend 15 to maybe 20 minutes. So you don't want to lose people. I get a lot of private messages and DMs that say, you really were talking to me. And I do a lot of motivational speaking at the cosmetology schools in my area. I have about 9 schools, and they give me free reign to come in and speak. And I let them know my faith, and I let them know I believe in God. And if they don't, that's okay. I don't have to answer for them, but I'm here to let them know that that's where I find peace, and I don't have stress, and I don't have anxiety. And I quote a few scriptures here and there, like Philippians 4, 6, and 7, about be anxious for nothing kind of thing. And I usually get a lot of people afterwards that come up and go, I applaud your faith. And I'm like, I don't do it for that. And one of my little taglines is, I do what I do for the praise of one. It's not for Emily. It's not for anybody listening or watching this. And I do what I do for him. And I try to be that light, because God knows it seemed to be going to hell in a handbasket, the world does.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. Absolutely. I feel like even with the podcast, it's all just to get that nod from God and not as much from anyone else, like to be the vessel and to help proclaim the good news and make it more accessible to people. And if it helps one person, fantastic. And it's not about the hundreds, but it is about, the fish and the loaves and how that can affect the 5,000. So I absolutely agree. Just focusing on him truly does help it be more authentic and honest and humble. And so you said you've been doing this for a while now. How did you become a speaker?
I worked for a company called Salon Centric up until December, and it was almost 20 years I was with them. About 18 years ago, I just felt like I wanted to speak to the students when I kind of understood what the industry was about. I realized it wasn't about selling shampoo, it was about relationships. And I think one of the biggest things that I tell them is I stand up in front of the class and I tell them, you can think I'm full of you know what, or you can think I know what I'm talking about. Either way, you're right. Your opinion of me means absolutely nothing. You didn't make me, you didn't create me. And when you realize that I'm here and I don't get paid to be here, but I'm here because I'm trying to deposit into you. And then I think one of the biggest things is in this industry, I'm sure you're, being a part of, is I try to teach them to never rely on a man for anything. And being a straight male myself and being around women for 20 years doing this industry, they kind of look at you kind of funny. And basically I just tell them, I said, you have to do this for you, because there's no guarantees in that other human being, your mate, your spouse, significant other, whatever that situation looks like. There's no guaranteeing that they'll be there tomorrow, regardless. Yeah. And you have to do it for you. And I'll kind of interject a little side note is I just started speaking this maybe about 2 years ago. Is I would say that, of course, I love God more than anything else. But on this earth, I love myself more than anything, more than my wife, more than my kids, more than anything that I have, any worldly possession. Because if I don't love myself more than anything else, how can I show my boys what true love looks like? God didn't make a mistake when he made me. So for me to try to instill that in people, to realize that, like I said, the 5 people you hang around the most is who you become. My mentors of those 8 or 9 that I have in my box of influence, they instill in me that the greatness that they each have, the strengths that I don't, and they make me into a better person every single day. So I try to turn that around on the cosmetology world, anybody that wants to listen, anybody that just needs coaching or mentoring. There's been several hairdressers that I've asked, can you come speak to my spouse? Can we have couples therapy? And I'm like, I'm not a licensed therapist, but you're making this harder than it has to be. And I think I tell people that all the time. Life is really easy, and we overcomplicate things a lot, and it doesn't have to be that hard.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, even in scripture, it says that when God made man, he proclaimed it to be good. He said it is good, and it is made in his image. And a lot of the times, and of course, like being in the hair industry, one thing that I've learned is that we're fantastic at tearing ourselves down. We don't need any help. I don't need your help to make me feel bad. I can do that on my own. And one of my favorite things to tell people when they're unloading or when they've been able to vent to me is, and they're, unloading about someone else, I always say, just tell them you don't need help adding stress, that you can do that all on your own. Because a lot of the times, like, we don't need to hold on to what other people are saying to us. And we definitely don't need to add onto the bucket of stress that we already carry. And we barely want to give that to God as it is. So, yeah, like, I absolutely agree. Life can be much easier than we make it, but we just can stand in front of a mirror or throughout our day, pick up all the things we didn't do versus acknowledge all the things that we did do, and also just bringing God along for the ride. And I love that you were able to kind of take that and start to speak to other people and also acknowledge, like, hey, like, I'm not a therapist, but this is what I do know, and this is what has worked for me. And that's a really great foundation for a lot of people. And I don't think that they realize that that's accessible to them. The simple knowledge of that you are good, and all you need to do, there's nothing that you need to do, but simply delight in the Lord. And then all those things will start to fall into place. It's that 100%. Lie that we have all of these expectations that we have to meet. So talk to me about, has there been like a memory in your life or a moment in your life where you could feel that God was moving and made you incredibly uncomfortable? I always call them spiritual growth pains, or even a time, even now looking back and saying like, oh, wow, like God definitely moved that for a particular situation in my life.
That's a great question. And it's kind of part of my story. When I'm in front of the room of students, it could be 20, it could be 60. I actually spoke at a high school of 1,200 students once, and that was a little nerve-wracking because little high school kids, they don't care.
Nope, and they can be mean.
But at the same time, what I tell them is this, and I hold my eye down and go, do you see any care in these eyes? When I leave, I don't care what you think of me. Your opinion of me means absolutely nothing because you didn't create me. And they just kind of look at me like, what? I'm like, we allow people to put labels on us, and we let them stick. You don't get to put labels on me because I will not allow it. It's my choice. And I choose not to let you put labels on me. And they just look at me like I have three eyes, because they don't usually hear people talking to them like that. But my story, about 6 years ago, my now ex-wife, we have a 13-year-old together. She said, between you, me, the dog, the house, the bills at Kingston, just everything going on in life, I think it's best if you move out and we get a divorce. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, we've been talking about this for 2 years. And I said, we've never discussed divorce. Yeah. Needless to say, there was many couple of weeks of just tearful, because the problem is I realized that I put her on a pedestal and she was number one and God was like number 12. And I fault myself for not making him first. I don't think that was the situation. I think it had a lot to be with unequally yoked. And she didn't believe in really going to church. She wasn't really raised up that way. And I'm not blaming her. It takes two to tango kind of thing. And I know for a fact I didn't cheat. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't raise my voice. She was also a hairdresser, so I'm kind of married into this industry. It didn't make sense. And I tell people that you have this puzzle, and the first thing you do is flip it over, and it's just a mess. And you're thinking, there's no way I can do this. And we work the borders first. And the borders were the foundation for me of, what does this look like? And it took about 3 years before it all finally made sense that she was dating her old boyfriend. She was talking to him through emails and phone messages and like Skype calls kind of thing. And now they got married, and they've been married, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years, which it is what it is. And that was a really tough time for me. And I was living in my mother's basement. I called it the Bat Cave because it was cold and it was dark. And I remember, so what I try to teach a lot of the stylists is their love languages. You should know what your 5 love languages are. And you should know, because for you or your spouse that you're about to have, or your boyfriend or whatever it is, or girlfriend or whatever, you should know what your love languages are. And mine is physical touch and words of affirmation. And living in my mother's basement, I was not getting physical touch. And when I say that, I don't mean sex. It's just in general of having that physical contact with someone, holding hands, just a hug. And I wasn't getting that. So for about a year and a half, I was basically living in my mother's basement. At 40 something odd years old, that is not where you want to be. Yeah. And that is where I found like God himself. And I'll never forget having the encounter, if you will. I was laying in the bed. It was about 1:30 in the morning, and I was on my phone looking at one of those websites like farmers.com. I don't know what the name of it was. It wasn't Tinder. It was like a dating site.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Farmers. I don't know what it was. And I'm not a farmer. So I'm just looking at this site. Yeah. I was like, it was not farmers.com. I promise. But it wasn't Tinder. It was just one of those dating sites, match.com or something. And I was like, and I was filling everything out. And I was like, God, you know what I need. You know, I need that interaction. I need to go on a date. I need to and I was like, and I'm just about to hit the button to submit. And I hear that voice as loud as you and I talking that says, what are you doing? And I grabbed the flashlight from the side of the floor and I'm shining it around the bedroom because I thought my mom or stepdad was downstairs. And I'm like,
watching over your shoulder.
Didn't hear anybody come downstairs. And I'm like, it's just a dating site. I'm not on something I'm not supposed to. And I was like, I'm looking around and there's nobody in the room. And I was freaked out. Put the flashlight down and I was about to hit it again. And I heard that voice even louder saying, what are you doing? And I swiped up and I said, nothing. Nothing. I said, I fully submit to you.
Wow.
And at that moment, it was kind of that encounter that I got goosebumps talking about it. It was so impactful for me to know that I have to trust God's timing and that I wasn't ready to be in that situation because what's crazy is now my wife now, Susan, I've known her for 20 years. And when I started dating my ex, we'd only been dating for a week or two. I thought Susan was interested. So I booked an appointment to get my hair cut. And I walked up to the front and they said, Susan, Roger's here. Because we'd always kind of liked each other, but not like on an intimate level. Just we were real good friends. And her face turns beet red and she gets embarrassed. And she's like, what are you doing? I was like, you're going to cut my hair. I was going to like a litmus test to see if she actually liked me. She didn't flirt. She didn't shampoo my hair, which she always shampoos the guys. She didn't flirt. She didn't accidentally brush against me. She didn't do anything inappropriate. She didn't even say, hey, can we go out? I just felt like she wasn't interested. So because I was really interested in her. So that's when, Jeannie and I got married and we had a kid and all this happened about 6 years ago. So we were married about a little over 10 years. And my wife and I now have this ongoing joke that I always say it could have been you. And you could have had all this 17 years ago if you would have just said you were interested. So I give her a hard time about it, but that journey.
And was she? Did she ever confess?
She was interested, but she's very stern, and she looks me dead in the eye and says, "When I'm at work, I'm at work. I don't hint, I don't play, I don't horse around." And she'll do 3 or 4 or 5 haircuts a day, along with the female clientele. Yeah. I don't ever have to worry about her. I know, and that's that trust factor that I don't know. If she's going to do it, she's going to do it anyways. If I'm going to do it, there's nothing she can do about it. And I have to have that in my head that I fully 100% trust her. Yeah. And Satan will come in occasionally to try to plant stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I trust her fully. So being in that place, in that basement, and it happened again about 2 or 3 months later, I was about to do it again. And I heard, this time it was almost like a voice of disgust. It was like, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing. And I was like in my head thinking, I told you I fully submitted and I wasn't. Yeah. So the way the story goes is I was in church. This was maybe 6 months after that second time. And I'm in front row because if I'm in the back, being in the beauty industry, I get like, oh my God, did they get dressed in the dark? Or look at her hair. You know what I'm. If you're a hairdresser, exactly. You know what I'm saying.
I can't go to Target and be at peace.
No, I mean like, oh my God, did you get dressed in the dark? Your fashion sense is awful. And I'm not even a licensed hairdresser. I've just been doing it for so long that I've picked up those things.
It's just unfortunate because it's naturally. It really is. I can relate.
And it's not being judgy. I tell people I'm not judgy, McJudgy by no means.
It's just embedded in you at that point.
It really is. After about 10 years, you're like, oh,
yeah, okay. You can't help it.
You need a hairdresser. Here's my card. So I'm in church. I'm getting my Jesus on, and I turn around to look, and I see Susan sitting in the back of in the back of the church, and there's about 400 or 500 people in there, and it's like the only light is shining on her. And she's with her girlfriend, Lori, and I text her because she used to be my customer. And I text her, I'm like, what are you doing here? She said, I've been coming to church here for like 8 years. And I was like, I've never seen you. She said, I've been here since the doors opened week 2. And I was like, I've never seen you.
Wow.
She said, I've always left before you and Jeannie left because I didn't want it to be awkward. And I went, well, that's weird. Why would she say that? So I talked to her after church. We talked for a few minutes. They invited me to lunch, and I told them that I had other plans, that, but maybe next week. The next Sunday, I'm sitting in church, getting my Jesus on, and she's sitting by herself in the same spot. So I text her and go, do you care if I come sit with you? Where's Lori? And she said, well, her husband was sick. She couldn't come to church. So I went back and sat with her, and I've been sitting with her ever since.
Wow.
And the way I remember it, about 6 months into dating, we're walking in Chattanooga. It's called the Walnut Street Bridge. It's this huge walk-in bridge. It's beautiful at night and everything else. And it's dusk, and it's beautiful. And we were dressed up. My older son was taking photos. And we're walking, and I stopped, and I looked at her, and I said, I need to talk to you about something. She thought I was going to propose. But I looked at her, and I said, I don't need you to complete me. And she was like, what? And I was like, let me finish. I said, God completes me. I said, I need you to compliment me. I need you by my side. I don't need you to lead, and I don't need you to follow. I need you beside me to compliment me. Not to say I look good, because I know I look good. And she's like, God, you're so stupid. And she rolled her eyes. At that moment, I knew she loved me, because I could tell when she rolls her eyes and says, you're so stupid, that usually means they love you. And I was like, just let me finish what I'm trying to say. And she's like, okay. I said, I don't need you to complete me. I'm totally fine living by myself. But I want to go through the rest of this life with you, and I need you as my complement. And she's like, that's pretty good. Did you just think of that? I was like, I had a little help from the big man upstairs, but all of that story brought me to today in a roundabout way. And when I just submit, and I think that's the problem a lot of people deal with, is they try to do it themselves, and they get in toxic relationships instead of letting, they walk in the door one day and you feel it, you see it, and go, oh my God, that's him or that's her.
Yeah,
And
that's so good. That's incredible. I think that God seems to have a theme where I feel like God loves to be like, what are you doing? It's one of his favorite things to call us out in. And I also agree that one thing that I feel like God has taught me is that he has gone before me. So he knows the plans and things that he has for me. But when we don't see it, I've always described it as like when you're watching a toddler. Like, I don't know, like being in charge of a toddler it's so easy but so stressful at the same time, because they don't see the dangers around them, but they also don't see what you already have for them. There's just a certain time that, whether you're the parent or the parent left you with them, they tell you like, hey, at 1, give them such and such thing. So, but it's like 12 and they're wanting it now, and you're having to reassure them, you're going to get it. I just need you to sit put and don't. And then I remember my niece used to wander into the kitchen, and we had to like physically tie a towel around the bars. Otherwise she would rip it open, leave it open, and like grab whatever and just stuff her face. And little kids, like, they'll eat and they'll get their fill, but then they'll get sick. And so I always described it as God and us. A lot of the times we're that toddler who doesn't understand what God has for us. And if we're willing to be patient just by a little bit, the reward is so much better. Not only because we waited, but because just knowing that God had a time and a purpose and a plan for it. Because when we look back, we can see what he was doing. We're able to notice where we messed up, because we're like, this is where I take control. And God, of course, will allow you to take control, will allow you to mess up, so that you're able to recognize, okay, maybe it's not the best when I do my own. Because God's a God of free will, and he allows you to make your own choices. And I can't relate. I mean, I can absolutely relate to what you're saying, that God will always look at you and just say, what are you doing? Like, I have all of this for you. If you could just be patient, if you could just wait for a second. I think that, even using you, Roger, as an example, like in that bat cave that you were in, it made you value that physical touch more, because you knew what it was like not having it. You knew what it was like. The absence of that touch made the presence of the touch be even more prominent and being more valuable. And so now, like you mentioned, like you absolutely trust her because you know her character and you know what she's capable of. But like you said, there's nothing that you can do but trust and believe that when she goes to work, she's working. When she comes home, she's with you. And the same thing can be said about you. So
100%.
I think that's incredible. So talk to me about what that was like now stepping into that, like trusting God. Like you mentioned, you tried, to do it again. And then you're like, all right, God, this is all you. Were there any other places in your life that you also had to trust God in, like whether it was like in your career, finances, like even looking for your own place down the road, or even asking for her hand in marriage? Like, were there places that you also needed to learn to trust God more? All
of the above. What's funny is, I'll talk about this in a second. I don't know if you're going to have a video, but the remote control.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I keep one at my desk as a reminder that I'm not in control. And I do have free will to control this. And if you and I are watching TV and I'm holding this, it's pretty much whatever Roger wants to watch. But if Emily's holding this, it's whatever Emily wants to watch.
Most likely The Office.
I would watch that with you. But I've gotten to the point now where Zig Ziglar was a mentor of mine before he passed. And of course, I still listen to a lot of his stuff. And one of the things he talks about is the word TV stands for time vacuum. You'll catch yourself sitting there watching more and more and more and more and not getting done what you need to get done. So I literally will I've recorded a few basketball games that are on today, and I don't really care for it, but I like this time of year, March Madness, and I might watch occasional football game or baseball game, but I usually don't watch TV, and it doesn't do anything for me financially, spiritually. There's usually a lot of curse words, and the good Lord knows I can slip up on those myself. I don't need any extra help, especially driving down the road. So I've taken these and well, I mean, you got to think what I did. I drove about 35,000 miles a year, seeing salons.
Once a northerner, always a northerner.
Oh my God. From Chattanooga down to about Atlanta. And I was doing about 35,000 miles a year, and you see a lot of idiots on the road. But when I took this, and one of my motivational Mondays was about the remote, and I took an old remote and just threw it over my shoulder into the back of the yard.
Did you have to go out later and pick it up?
Oh yeah, I had to go pick it up. But I mean, it was an old junky remote. But I was like, what it really boils down to is giving up control and fully 100% submitting to Him. I know I have to get up, and I have a job to do every day, and I have my wife and my boys to take care of, and I have things around the house, and I have stuff I have to do. But the first thing I do, usually after I get up and run to the restroom, is say, God, step in my shoes. What is it you want me to do today? Let me be your vessel and your light, and be the light for at least one person and change one person's life. So when you said that earlier, leaving the 99 for the one, and it kind of clicked for me that that's exactly what I'm doing is that I just want one person. If it's 10, if it's 99, if it's 100, that's great. But if it's one, let me help change one person to see through your eyes what I see.
Yeah.
You asked, and I didn't want to miss this point. You said something earlier about having those moments where it wasn't the encounter, but my very first encounter was when I was moving things out of my house to a storage unit. And I took her Tahoe and loaded up. I had about 5 loads. And what's crazy is I'll never forget this, and people can say they don't believe it. I don't care. I was there, and I know what happened. Every time I pulled up to the unit, I would unlock the door and lift the lid. And when I did, it would start raining. And I'm like, are you serious? And I looked up and started laughing. I'm like, now I'm going to get soaked. So I put everything in the storage unit. I closed the lid, locked it, and I started to drive away, and it would stop raining. That happened 4 times. The last time I pulled in, I opened the door and I looked up, and it didn't start raining. And I started putting some stuff in, and I was just about done, and it started sprinkling again. And I went, if this is what you mean, I said, your sense of humor is hysterical. I said, but if you're washing me of this, I totally get it. And if that's the symbolism, I get it. And I said, and now at this point I was soaked. So I'm driving back to the house to basically give her car back, take mine and leave. And I almost made it to the house, and I pull over on this little country road. It was about a 10-minute drive. And I had an absolute come apart. One of those ugly snot slinging cries. The ones that look like you've been beat with a ball bat. And I'm screaming at the top of my voice to God, going, why did you let this happen? What did I do wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm screaming. And then I hear it was a loud voice, and it said, do you trust me? And I said, yes. And then I heard again, no, do you trust me? And I said, yes, with everything holy inside of me. I trust you with my whole everything. And then I heard, let me do what I do. And then goosebumps again.
Yeah.
And
wow.
I don't get to tell that encounter story too much because people at the beauty schools and stuff, when I look at you like you got three eyeballs. I know what I heard. I know I got rained on. I know what I felt. And then I said, I fully commit to you. And then I heard, let me do what I do. And then I looked up in the rearview mirror and it looked like I wasn't even crying. If we've all had those ugly snot slinging cries, and it takes you about 45 minutes to get your composure, and it looks like you've been beat with a ball bat.
Yeah.
I looked in the rearview mirror and there was nothing wrong with me. And I was like, this is insane. No one's ever going to believe this, but I don't care. I don't care. And I went back to the house. I backed the car in and I walked over to her and I kissed her on the forehead and I looked at her and I said, I love you. And I started walking away. She said, where are you going? Are you not going to fight for this? And I went, you've got to be kidding me. And I said, you've lost your, I think I said, damn. I said, you've lost your damn mind. And I tried to do my best not to just keep my composure without cussing her like a dog. And I was, because I was hurt.
Yeah. Your emotions.
And I just said, I love you, but I am not in love with you. And God's got something much more and much better in store for me than this. And I don't mean it disrespectful, but I love you and you're the mother of my child. I will always love you, and there'll be a special place in my heart for you. And I wish no ill will on you. And I laughed, and she booed and cried. I don't know what she meant by trying to fight, but I mean, for 2 weeks, I was like, why are we doing this? And that's what she wanted. Yeah. So I would never go back and change a thing. Because I wouldn't be where I'm at with God if I would have changed something. Wouldn't have my 13-year-old. I wouldn't be in this situation. And I love the walk that I have now. I'm in a really, really good place.
Yeah, that's truly incredible. One thing I've learned, I've had someone, I don't remember who told, I want to say a close mentor of mine, Nancy, told me, people can argue with a lot, but they can't argue with your story. They can't tell you what you saw and what you didn't saw.
Truth.
Or what you didn't see. And that stuck with me. And I think it stuck with me because she told me this like a week or two ago. And for someone who is interviewing people and asking them about what they've experienced, it's so true. I can't have you, come here and interview you and then say, no, Roger, that didn't happen.
Sure.
And completely discredit your truth. So I absolutely relate to that because I remember I had an encounter. I won't get too into it, but I had an encounter with Jesus. And I honestly thought I was bat insane. Like, I remember I saw what I saw. My eyes were closed, but I saw what I saw. Because, like, when you close your eyes, what do you see? Darkness, right?
Sure.
Unless you're staring at the sun. It's like a weird orange light. But I just remember that the silhouette of Jesus' face just, appeared. It started as a very small light in a distance, and it grew and it grew and it grew until it was, like, right here, right before my face.
Wow.
And the silhouette of his face, and it was moving. It was so weird to think back at it, but he just looked at me. He tilted his head down. He smiled and just nodded at me. Like this nod of approval, this amount of peace and love that overflowed. And I stared at it like just dumbfounded. Like, what am I looking at? And I remember that I opened my eyes because I had actually bowed my head. Me and my friend were watching a video, and I don't even remember what that video was about, but it was a testimony or something, and they had said, okay, let's bow our heads to pray, and we bowed our heads, and I don't remember the video. I don't even remember what the prayer was about. I just remember what I saw, and I remember thinking, like, no one's going to believe what I saw. But I just remember that I told her, and the reaction that she gave me was not one that I expected. She just was so overwhelming with love and support, and was like, oh my gosh, like, this is incredible, your life is going to change. And I was like, okay, so she's crazy too, I see. And she's always been one of my close friends, my very close spiritual rock friend. She always keeps me tethered to God and will remind me so much. And just her had she not said that to me, if she said, oh, probably not, I think that I would have dismissed it. But that her way of response was an anchor to me. And I was able to kind of be like, wow, like, this did happen, and she did believe me. And I always recount that all the time. Like, her response is what really helped me believe what I saw. And, like, till this day, I remember one of the things she told me was, your life is about to change. And I was like, don't know how that could be. And sure enough, I wouldn't change a thing. My life has completely 360 changed. I'm not the same person I was before. And I agree with you. I wouldn't change a thing. And it's so funny. God's character, he is so loving. He is so caring, but can be so hard to let go of control. You can even, I always say, I think I let go of control. I'll, like this pen I have in my hand, I will, in my head, I'm like, okay, here you go, God. And not even 2 seconds later, I'm like, how did this get back in my hand? And it's truly putting into practice what it's like giving it to God and wholeheartedly believing that he has it, that he has already gone before you. It's just that weird, where we become uncomfortable is that area of unknown, that area of uncertainty. And what I've learned is that the enemy loves to use that blank slate of, I don't know what's going on, to start the posting up images into your head of the worst case scenario, the worst case scenario, the worst case scenario. And in those moments, it's always to say like, okay, well, even if that does happen, God will work with that. Even if that does happen, God will work with that. And he'll use that as a testimony. He'll make the best thing come out of that. So I absolutely agree. It's really hard to give God control, but when you do this, it's freeing, because then you live in this peace-like mindset and you have this, you unlock this cool gadget where you're like, I could choose to stress, or I could choose to lean on to God and not lean on my own understanding, because I'm emotional. I can, 1 minute I'm on the top of the mountain and the next minute I'm at the very bottom, and can't trust myself for that. But what I can trust is God's character and his goodness. Do you have, because before I forget, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you have like a happy memory from growing up in the church? Because I can relate, when you said the thing about you were there every time the door opened, my mother was a hairstylist. So every time her blow dryer turned on, it meant I was sweeping floor off the ground. So when people would ask me, are you going to become a hairdresser? No, absolutely not was my answer. And funny enough, God, I always say, don't ever say absolutely not, because God has a sense of humor. He'll say,
Never,
oh, well,
never
now
say
I'm...
never.
Yep, because God
Never
loves
say
to
never.
make your no a yes. So do you have just any memories or things that you look back and brings you a lot of joy, or just any moments like that from your childhood?
Looking back on it now, I mean, I realize that they were instilling a foundation in me. And
Yeah.
when they get older, they won't turn from it, kind of thing. And I applaud them for doing it. My father passed away about 8 years ago. My mother's still alive. I just, seeing my grandmother at church, and she, I don't know many people that would sit by the right hand of the Father. And my grandmother, Grandma June, she walked hand in hand with God himself. She was one of the most holiest. She should have been dead. She was in a car wreck when my father, I was just a baby. And back in the day, I mean, I'll be 55 in June, so I was maybe 53 years ago. I was maybe 6 months old, 54. There were a drunk driver came into their lane. My dad was driving. My two uncles were up front. My grandmother was in the back seat. The drunk driver hit us head on. Mom threw me in the floorboard, jumped on top, and my grandmother went through the front windshield.
Wow.
My dad split his head
Wow.
within an inch, like a millimeter. She'd been dead, they said. She had a metal plate in her leg and couldn't walk. So back 50-something years ago, that's all they knew. So they had to basically fix her leg so she couldn't bend it. And she was the most she worked till she was in third grade, I think, during the Depression, and never went to school after that. Just a God-fearing, just holy, just loved her some Jesus. And
Wow.
I never saw her bad or mad or upset or angry. I'm sure my mother might have some other stories, but I never saw Grandma June upset.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's the childhood I had, the memories I have of her being at church and getting her Jesus on. To me, that just makes me smile, because, I mean, she, like I said, I know without a shadow of a doubt, she's probably up there ringleading the whole thing.
Wow.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was cool.
I aspire to be like her, you know, make my grandkids believe I never had a bad day. That's amazing.
You try not to let it show. I mean, we all have bad days, but we try not to let it show. You said something a minute ago about the pen, and then you look back, and the next thing you know, the pen's back in your hand when you feel like you've submitted or gave up the remote. So one of the things that I share with people, I have a picture of a trapeze artist. So if I'm hanging upside down from my knees and I'm hanging onto your hands, and I'm hanging on to you and I'm about to let go, fully submitting and letting go is when I do this and you go flying. Because once I let you go, you're never coming back. So when you set the pin, you leave it back here. I mean, I know that's an example, but to fully submit, like taking the remote, me throwing it out in the yard, it took me 15 minutes to find it because it was also 9:30 at night. I could have mowed it over the next week, and because I never could have found it. But fully submitting, I use that analogy of using a trapeze artist, and that I'm upside down and I'm fully committing, because I'll be sitting in a back room at one of the salons or something talking to somebody about it, and they're like, that makes sense, because I'll look at the chair next to me and go, that's your problem, but I'll touch the chair with my hand, or I'll touch the chair with my foot because it's still there and I'm not giving it, I'm not fully submitting and giving it all to him. And then they show him the picture of the trapeze artist and say, you see this? This is what fully submitting is, letting go. Because once I let go, you don't get to come back. And it's that simple.
That's
and
good.
I was like, to me, I had to find something, and I just felt like it was in my spirit that that's what I needed to show people, because what I find is, and I don't mean any derogatory comments or no hate email, women have a hard time of letting go of this. Because they have to control their husband, the kids, and the house, and the money, and the bills, and the finances, and work, and they're juggling all these balls. And I'll tell them, I can juggle. I can juggle 3, but if you throw a 4th one in there, something's going to lose. Women are the same way. You can juggle 2 or 3, but if you're trying to juggle 15 things, something's going to suffer, and it's usually the spouse, it's usually the kids. It's never the house or the bills, because women are so driven on taking care of all that stuff. And I had that conversation with a lot of women, and one of the things I want to say earlier was, I feel like God put me on this earth to empower women to be even stronger than they already are by giving it all to God and letting God take control of the relationship with their spouse and their kids and with God and everything else. And I think it's kind of come full circle for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. I absolutely, as a woman, I can absolutely relate. I hate that I didn't get to go to, well, I could have, but I opted out of going to the retreat where you did speak for the salon. But I definitely can relate to that, because as a woman, you have, like responsibilities naturally, but naturally you're also, like, I'm sure you already know, you speak to women, like being a caregiver, you naturally want to care for people. Being a hairdresser, that's naturally what you're doing 365 when you're at the salon. Like, you are caring for this person, you're making sure that they're comfortable, you're listening to what's going on in their life, but at the same time providing great customer service. If you're a mom, you come home and take care of your child, and then the house needs to get taken care of, bills. If you have a pet, the pet needs to get fed. And so the last thing that you're going to take care of is yourself. And like you mentioned earlier, Roger, you got to love yourself and put yourself first. And that's one of the things that I have noticed, that if I can take care of myself, if I can put myself first, then my mothering is going to go up 100%. I'm going to have much more patience. I'm going to be able to feed and pour into my son the way that I need to, versus if I'm exhausted and I've kind of poured or worn myself too thin, and then I'm too exhausted and I'm short, or I have this additional homework that we have to do together and I'm already thinking about 100 other things, and I didn't take the time to take care of myself. And that's why I think God really emphasized, especially in Old Testament, about resting, about how I heard someone once say, this is like a year ago, he said, for God to really value us to rest, and he also made it one of the 10 commandments, even though this is Old Testament, like God must have really wanted us to rest if he added it into the right next to murder.
Sure.
Don't murder and take a nap. How hard is that? And so I think that gives us a kind of a viewpoint that God values us to lay our heads down and kind of like, hey, like you need to rest. I didn't make you so that you could wear yourself out. I made you so that you would rest and that you would take care of yourself and then take care of others. And again, like I said earlier, like there's nothing that we have to do. I think when we choose to delight in God, everything else naturally flows out, like your love for empowering women and how you believe that you're placed on this earth to do so. That comes from within, that comes from like Roger's love to do so, like his love for God and his love for himself empowers him and strengthens him to step in and help women and speak life into them and encourage them and uplift them and go to all of these places. And, I imagine you've met a lot of incredible people. You've heard a lot of incredible stories with the amount of speaking that you've done. What impact has that had in your life? I mean, I imagine meeting all of these different people and getting to speak to them has had a different effect as well.
I want to piggyback on something you just said, is when you don't have self-care, you're no good. Emily's no good to me broken. You're no good to me empty. You're no good to your spouse, to your kids, to your family if you're empty or broken. I have a gallon pitcher that I spray painted the bottom about 20% of the pitcher. And I taped it up with painting tape and I sprayed it. Of course, my wife lost her mind because it was one of her tea pitchers, but she had tape. So I take it to the schools and I set it up front. I take it to the schools and I set it up front and they go, what is that? I'm like, we'll get to it. I'm like, in this industry, I said, women, we as in this industry, but it's mainly women, we give and we're servants and we want to give and give and give and give and we forget about self.
Yeah.
So what I'm asking you to do is get up before everybody else about 30 minutes and sit in silence for about 5 or 10 minutes, do some affirmations, visualize your day, exercise, read, and scribe. Try to do all that in 30, 40 minutes. Your love tank will be so full that when you start giving through the course of the day and you get down to that 20%, the reason it's spray painted is the takers, if Emily's a taker and she sees my picture but can't see how much is in it because the level is below that, she stops taking. Your guests stop taking.
Wow.
If I show them that I'm still full, your guests, your family, everyone else will take from you because you allow it. I have to choose to take that much home to my spouse and kids. Because if I go home empty and I do that for 2-3 years, don't you think someone else is going to finally fill her love tank? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or my kids?
Yeah.
I don't want to be replaced by somebody else when it's my fault because I'm going home empty. So I had to piggyback on that because I think that's so crucial because you're no good to me broken and you're no good to me if you come home empty every night.
Yeah.
The industry people, I mean, I don't know if you know who Daniel Mason Jones is.
Oh, yes.
Him and I are very close. I did a podcast
I think
with
I
him.
met him a little bit under a year ago, actually, now that you mention it.
He's
great guy.
a beautiful human being.
Great guy.
Absolutely
Great guy.
just in love with him. He's such a great human. I did a podcast with him. More Than Beauty is his podcast.
Yes.
Episode 19. I don't even remember what the topic was now, but he's called me on a Monday and he said, what are you doing tonight? I said, what's your topic? And he told me, and I told him what it was. He said, if you'll do your Monday night thing and then come back to your office and then do it with me, we'll piggyback off of what you're already talking about. And that was probably one of the highlights. I was total fanboy and I was just,
oh yeah, he's fantastic.
He's such an amazing speaker. And I always tell people, bring Kleenex because he'll have you just squall in 1 minute and then belly laugh in the next minute.
He had me balling.
His story is amazing. And I love him. He's a good human and he wants everybody to win and succeed. Loves him some Jesus. It is what it is. And that was probably the highlight of being with that company for almost 20 years and getting to meet Daniel and getting to be on a intimate personal level with him and having his phone number. And every time I've ever called him, he's answered the phone. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't expect you to answer. And I was in a school one day and they're like, you don't know Daniel. And I'm like, hang on. I said, Daniel, I'm on speakerphone with you at the beauty school. And he's like, FaceTime me. And I was like, okay. So I FaceTime him and they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. So is Daniel. And I'm like, I tell people I'm not conceited. I'm convinced. I'm kind of a big deal. Yeah. If you don't think you're a big deal, nobody else is.
Honestly. And I always tell myself, like, I belong to a kingdom. And so that alone is impressive when you mention it. So it's incredible. And I love that because you're absolutely right. Daniel Mason Jones is such an incredible person. And it was an honor to meet him. And you're right. Like, you have to have tissues. You have to be ready. You think, and then you meet him and then you're like, I don't know anything.
You don't have a clue. Yeah, you're exactly right. 100%. That's great. I feel like I need to share this with you. So I'm driving on the road, having a conversation with God one day, and I'm driving on the road, and I said, God, you know how I feel about the word pastor. I hate to say the word loathe. I just don't like it because they've gotten bad raps over the years. I don't want to be a pastor. I'm more of a teacher. I feel like I'm teaching people. And it's a couple minutes later, I'm driving down the road and I hear that voice in it, that another encounter, and it says, you're not even a teacher. And I feel like I got gut punched. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not even a teacher? And it was a couple minutes later, and I heard that voice, and he said, you're a farmer. I'm like, what? He said, you plant seeds in people. It's up to them to water, to de-weed, to cultivate, to grow, and put sunlight on it.
Wow.
You are planting seeds of growth. Even if it's that little mustard seed, that little tiny seed, you're planting seeds of growth, but it's up to them to water it. It's no different than what I do in you. Oh, I got goosebumps again.
Wow.
And I'm like,
wow.
It's
so good.
So I was really butthurt that he said, I'm not even a teacher. And I'm like, okay. I could see myself with the farmer and the suspenders and the straw. I was like,
With the
I'm
picket.
planting seeds. Yeah.
I love
driving
that.
my tractor. I do have a John Deere tractor outside, a mower.
It probably was farmers.com now that we
I love it. No. Oh my God, the symbolism. It was. Oh, you're killing me, Emily. No, that's funny stuff. It is farmers.com. Let's just say it was farmers.com.
It's just farmers.com.
Oh, I'm wrecked now. That's funny.
I love how God, I always say God will humble me real fast. Like God, I think one of the times that God humbled me, I talk about it in like 2 episodes ago. We did like a Bible book club where we just talked about the book of Job. And I remember I always make this joke whenever I hear like how the world is, or when I see like how it can be. And from my worldly perspective, from my imperfect perspective, I'm like, I don't know how God does it. Like if I was God, I would have just snapped my fingers and wiped the board and started over. Like and I remember not even like 2 days later, maybe a week later, I just felt God place in my heart. I was reading Job, and the moment where God is explaining Job and talking about how the creation of everything came to be, and how Job can't fathom or understand the atoms and the molecules and the implication of everything that God has ever created, down to the little, like, everything. And it was just, I had a moment where God was just telling me, there's so much work that I put into this world, and there's so much that I put into you guys individually, that I can't just turn away from it. Like, it's not as easy to scrap the board. Like, this is too valuable to me. What I've made is too good and too valuable for me to simply erase and start over. And he was just telling me, like, there's more than you could ever understand, and there's more than your brain and your being could understand about the greatness of everything, down to an atom, and everything up from a cloud to a cat and a dog and to a person individually. And it really opened my eyes to, like, I truly don't know. But what I do know, and what I learned from that moment, was that God was just telling me he values us way too much, that he put too much work into us. And one of the things that the enemy loves to do is to make us believe that we're not worth much, that we can pick ourselves down. And he loves to talk about how we're, God didn't put that much work into us. Why would God love us? Why would God pick us? God, you got to get yourself straight before you can come to God. And I think God took that moment to just show me, like, I love my kids where they are and how they are and how broken the world is. I receive it and I want it just the way that it is. I can work with this. And again, like why the podcast was born, what God can do with my pain is he's like, I can work with this. I can do so much with where we're at right now. You couldn't, because you're imperfect.
Sure.
Like, you have a limited perspective. You aren't God. And he humbled me real fast. I have never made that joke again. I said, that's fair.
Oh, that's funny.
That's fair.
That's funny. I love it. You said something just a second ago that said I'm worthy. And I think one of the things that I try to instill in people is I ask them to go home and to do it and take a dry erase marker and go to the bathroom, turn on some music, and make sure nobody's home. And on the mirror, right across your face, it's like your soul has to see it. You write the words, I am worthy and I am enough. The first time you try to do it, it'll come out like, oh, I'm worthy, and you won't be able to do it. Then you'll do it, and you'll have this ugly snot slinging cry because you don't feel it and you don't believe it. After about the 4th or 5th time of saying it, you start to actually kind of believe I'm worthy and I'm enough.
Wow.
And I hear some of these old hymns, and they talk about God saved a wretch like me, and, I'm not worthy of this, I'm not worthy of that. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm a child of the King. I am worthy of all of the blessings he's going to give me. He says all I have to do is ask.
Wow.
My free will says that I choose to follow you, or I choose not to. Follow the ways of the law. The land. I can do whatever I want to do, or I can choose to follow you. I choose to follow you. And when I do, don't you think he's going to reward me for that? I'm thinking, what was it? If my son came up to me and said, Dad, I'd like this, and I hand him a snake. No, that's not what he wanted. Dad, I want this, and I hand him a rock. What kind of dad am I? How is that any different than my son? Yeah. Sure, there's going to be times that I have to tell him no, and he's not happy about that. Son, no, it's fine. Don't ask me again. It's the same thing with God. No, or you might not even hear the no, but it's like, why is this not happening? I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. It's not going to happen because you're not supposed to have it. It's not supposed to be that way.
Yes.
And the sooner you admit to that and submit
Yes.
to that, just press on to something else.
That's incredible. I want to piggyback off of that because I'm going to piggyback off of one of like the praying. This reminded me, there's a long time ago, there's this contest, this giveaway for this beautiful remodeled house. All you had to do was enter your email every day, and you know there's gonna be someone who picked. But the thing is, this house was renovated in Ohio. And then nothing bad against Ohio. I just, looking back now, I can barely survive in North Carolina cold. I would have died in Ohio. Okay, the Lord was showing me mercy.
Sure,
but at that time, every single day, I had like 5 different emails that I was filling into this website, convinced that I was going to win. So when I didn't win, I felt defeated. And this was before my relationship with God and more of religion with God, or more of acknowledgement of God, where I like would do a quick prayer, like, God, I hope I get this house. And I didn't get it. And I look back at it now and I see that God was like, you have no business in Ohio, at least right now.
Sure.
You definitely don't want that house you think you want. And it's just, a lot of the times God is like, you think you want this, but what I have is so much better. And another reason why I wanted to piggyback is recently, when I think one of the things that God has been teaching me is, a lot of the times, I think in the past when I've prayed, I've always prayed like, oh God, your will be done. Like, never feeling worthy of his blessings, like always too afraid to ask for big, you know, like I would ask big, but then I would quickly be like, you know what, never mind, just whatever you see is fit. And I have learned now that God has been placing on my heart to be coming to him with open hands. Say, God, like, you are good, you are great, everything you've given me, everything that I already have is fantastic, but you know what? If you have something grand for me, if you have something big for me, make me into the person that you're making me to be, but also I receive whatever you have. Because a lot of the times the enemy wants us to pray those weak, softed prayers of like, oh, I don't know, possibly your will be done, your kingdom come. And that's a great prayer when you're a starter, you know, when you're learning the ropes and you're learning to grasp prayer. But in my walk right now, I feel like God has really strengthened me and has said like, hey, I have a kingdom. I am God. Everything. I have made the earth. I made the waves. I've created this entire planet and the universe. Don't be afraid to ask me. And even if I say no, don't be afraid to keep asking, but also pray to receive whatever I have for you. Pray that the blessings and abundantness that I have for you, whether it's physical and spiritual, just pray with open hands and just say, Lord, I receive all the greatness and the blessings, even though I don't know what it is. I receive it. I'm excited to find out what it is that you have for me, because I think that for such a long time, I wouldn't even pray for big things. I guess I was too, I don't want to say afraid, but I guess just didn't do so. Didn't think that I was worthy of asking God for bigger and better, not in a materialistic sense, but in a spiritual growth sense. Like, God, I'm in a place in my life where I'm ready to see what you have for me. And actually just to see, you never know. If God says no, then that's the worst that can happen, is God saying no. And that's the same as not saying the prayer at all, but taking the step to pray and ask God and allow him to reveal to you what he does have for you, and be like, Lord, like, this is what I'm wanting right now, but what do you have for me? Let's work on this together. Like, let's think big, better, and bigger. So I think that what you were saying just really opened my eye. Like, you are worthy, and you are worthy of, and it's not saying that you're coming to God and only asking him for things, but it's also coming to him and acknowledging his greatness and what he's already given you, and saying like, God, what do you have for me? What blessings and overflowing of the 5,000, and what 12 baskets are going to be left over of what you give me so that I can bless others, whether that's with the podcast, whether I help one person with the podcast and that is my leftover, or I help just another person who needed something to eat. Like, show me what it is that you have for me, and the blessings that overflow to the fact that I get to bless others. And I just wanted to piggyback off of that, because I think that is just something that in this season God has been teaching me to accept, that I am worthy of his blessings, that I can receive his blessings, that there is nothing that I need to do. There is no hoop I have to jump through to qualify for what he has for me.
It's crazy. Like I said, we make life so hard. And just some of the older hymns, they just they rub me the wrong way a little bit. And you said something, and I wrote down, you have not because you ask not. And then one of the conversations I have with people is, especially the ladies I'm talking to, is because they still have a problem with the remote. When I say the sun, the stars, the earth is tilted at a certain level, it rotates a certain way, the moon orbits a certain way, and all of this rotation and all the stars and all the galaxies are put out there. Do you think he needs your help at all? And he did all of that. I mean, you can't even begin to fathom the galaxies and everything else that they're finding with these telescopes. He did all of that. He doesn't need your help. Just need you to submit. Just submit.
So good.
It's that simple. It just kind of cracks me up that we just can't seem to give up the remote control.
It's I absolutely love that you said that, because it really does highlight, like, we believe, that we need to do something, when in reality you just need to submit. You just need to delight in God and be another thing that God has been teaching me so much. Clearly, I've been in the university this entire month, but living in childlike wonder. I think that God has just always placed it heavy on my heart that I just need you to be a child. And what do children do?
I love you.
Roam. You know what? I'm going to need you to say that again on camera for Shannon, because you got to tell her I'm your new favorite now. I told Shannon
oh my
yesterday.
God, I love me some Shannon too. She's precious.
You know what? But she'll be really happy, because when I didn't go to the retreat, she came back and she was like, Kiki, I'm so mad at you. You and Roger would have hit it off. You guys would have became best friends. All of this. And I was like, oh, I believe you. So she'll be really happy.
I'll have to send her. I'm going to send her a message right now. Emily is my new best friend.
I'm going to change your contact in my phone to like a bestie. Roger
is my new
best friend. Is my new bestie.
That's hysterical. I just text her.
Fantastic.
When we had a conversation a couple months ago, whatever it was, a couple weeks ago, months ago, it feels like it was forever ago.
Forever ago.
I knew that there was some kind of connection, and I was a little skittish when I was coming into the driveway. I was thinking, I don't know what this looks like or what we're going to do. And and I was at peace with it, though. So, and like I said, when you just said childlike, that is one of the biggest things I tell people all the time, and I'll never forget this story. There was a video I was watching, and there was this little 4 or 5 year old boy. There were two of them. One was black and one was white, and they were holding hands, and they were like interviewing him. He said, "Little Johnny, where are you going?" He said, "I'm going with my buddy Timmy, and I'm going to get my hair cut." He's like, "Why are you doing that?" He said, "Because if I get my hair cut just like his, no one can tell us apart." And I'm like, stop. Oh my God. And I was squalling, and Susan walked in and she said, "What is wrong with you?" And I showed her the video, and she went, "You're crying?" I went, "It's that childlike mentality. We're taught to hate. We're taught to hate. And the kids love each other, regardless of their gender, regardless of what color they are, regardless if they got things wrong with them, if they're missing an eye. There's so many things. And kids look past that. They might ask inquisitive questions. And I tell people, at what age do we stop acting like a child? I know it says that in the Bible, that we should, give away childish things and, grow up, basically. But at the same time, I think that mentality of that childlike mentality that I'm a child of God. He says I'm a child of God, but we act like an adult of God. Why is that? I am a child of the Most High King, my God. He's not going to make me in lack for anything. That's amazing. And I love that, because like that childlike, it's like that childlike wonder, that child curiosity, but also the fearlessness in children. Like, I'm okay. I just want to play, and I just want to be with my mom, or I just want to be with my dad. And it says in the Bible, when the disciples are fighting of like, who's the favorite, who's the greatest, and Jesus humbles them and says, "Truly, truly, I tell you, the greatest of all, like the greatest in the kingdom, is this child, this little child." And that sets the tone, because it's the childlike faith, is not knowing whether you're going to eat, but knowing that your parents will be there and provide for you, and that safety, and that just playing around. Children don't stress. A lot of the times kids live in this beautiful, just wanting to be friends with everybody, wanting to play. And, it isn't until a certain age where they become a little bit more self-aware, but like, it's that childlike wonder. It's seeing these little kids waddle up to you and hand you an imaginary burger, and you take a bite out of that imaginary burger, no matter what you don't know what's in the burger. You take a bite and you tell them they did a fantastic job. And it's that same thing. It's like God just wants us to live in that childlike wonder.
He wants us to. And so one of the things I ask myself is like, am I being too much of a grown up right now? And if the answer is yes, I need to revert back and I need to just sit down and release all that stress. And like you said, let go of it. And I think that that's, again, like, that's just something that I've learned from God. It's again, the greatest, we are his children, and the greatest in the kingdom is kids. You know, a lot of the times we dismiss children because we think they don't know, but kids know so much. I have learned a lot from my son alone. My son will humble me real fast. And I'm like, that's a good point, kid. Like, if we're willing to listen to them, they've got good things to say. Now, granted, sometimes it's questionable, but kids are just fantastic.
I love the mindset of the kids, and that's a whole nother podcast I think you could do.
Yeah.
Childlike wonder.
You know what? Next time you and me will do some side research, and I'll have you come back because I think that having you back would be fantastic. And I'm honestly, Roger, I am so grateful and blessed that you took the time to sit with me today and just gave me an hour of your day, because you're an incredibly busy man. You're doing great things, but at the same time, like, you took the time to sit with me today, and I value it. It's something that I know that is absolutely priceless, because like it says in the Bible, where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there also. And so I rejoice in knowing that we could spend this time together and could spend it in the presence of God. And hopefully whoever listens to this episode, is able to leave feeling like they gained a kingdom as well, and that they realize that they are worthy and they are loved, and to not be afraid to hand that off to God, and to not be afraid of to hear a voice in their back cave.
Exactly, in their back cave. It sounds like you're going to wrap up, and I'm totally cool with that. I think I want to say, like, just for anybody that does hear this, just know that you are worthy, and you are enough, and my God doesn't make mistakes. You're here for a reason and for a purpose. So if you're talking about the same God I am, you're here for a purpose, and there's a reason you're here. There's just so much going on in this world right now, and it breaks my heart to even think about it. I'm trying not to get emotional, but I've had so many friends that have just, for lack of better words, have taken their life because they feel like they didn't matter. And you're here for a purpose, and I can't stress enough, the people you hang around is exactly who you're going to become. You will be influenced by those people. And I always, like, if I'm talking with the girls in the salon, and I'm like, you might go out and have maybe a margarita. But if you go out with the girls and you have a girls' night, the next thing you know, you're drinking 5 or 6 because everybody else is drinking 5 or 6, and you don't do that. You become the product of your environment. So whatever you surround yourself with is stronger than you, no matter what. I don't allow myself to be around negative. You get one shot with me. If I show you a vision board, if I show you my affirmations, if I share my dreams with you and you think it's stupid, you are 86. You are gone. I will delete every kind of social media post. I will not follow you. I don't need you to tell me that I am not enough and I'm not worthy because you think it's stupid.
So good. So good. I am really glad, you beat me to the punch, because one of my questions for you was like, what would you say to someone, before we wrapped up? Roger, I must
be reading your notes.
We are besties for sure. And like, I want to just tell you real quick, when you said like, you don't want to get emotional, let me tell you something. I can't even watch a good Christian movie with already bawling, because they do a good job. I'm like bawling my eyes out. I'm crying. I can't, not even like a good commercial, like just back in the day when they used to have that commercial about the dogs and like in the arms of an angel, and the filter was gray and white.
I turned the channel.
Couldn't do it. I'm right with you. I feel like if you and me were in the same,
singing that. Yeah. I think it's Sarah Bareilles singing that. Yeah.
If you and me were in the same room, bawling.
Listen. Jesus Revolution. Have you seen it yet?
I haven't. I really want to. I love Jonathan Rumi.
Bring some Kleenex, because I cried 3 or 4 times, because I'm a sucker for people when they get baptized, because I know what it did for me.
And you heard what happened on there. Oh, amazing.
Geez, I might start crying now. When they were baptizing all those people in the water, I sat back. We got in those really nice comfy seats, and we're reclined, and I'm trying. I didn't bring Kleenex, so I'm grabbing my shirt. And she's like, "What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Shut up, leave me alone." And she's like, "Are you crying?" And I'm like, "Shut up, leave me alone." And I was like, "Yes, I'm crying." Not to see me. I was like, "I'm invisible. I'm doing the John Cena. You can't see me." So
I'm the same way. If I'm crying, please don't look at me.
I don't even care anymore. I'm just like, Lord, I can watch American Idol and cry, because those kids are giving it all.
Oh my gosh! Yes, That is amazing. I'm glad you said that. I love the actor Jonathan Rumi. I really want to watch Season Revolution. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen The Chosen. I'm sure you have, but have you?
I think so. I don't remember. I probably have.
You would know. You would know.
Have.
Trust me. They came out with a season 3 recently. I really recommend it. It's fantastic. They have a lot of of the miracle scenes in the last season, and it's with that same actor in it, and his delivery is fantastic. That show has made me cry like a dozen times. And
great. That's what I need.
It's just
Another
incredible.
show that's gonna make me cry.
I know. It does help. I always feel like whenever I want to read the Bible, but I also want to do something visually, I will watch the show. I've seen it over so many times. And every time I watch it, I feel like I learn something new about Jesus and his character and God and the disciples, and so good. But I won't keep you too long. I really appreciate you beating me to the question.
I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. I think that we were really on it today. I can't wait to tell Shannon that I've got a new bestie, and that she'll be very
She'll
excited.
have to listen or watch. I love you, Shannon. Miss you.
Awesome. All right then. Is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye to everyone?
No, that's great. I really enjoyed it. It was. I kind of came in with no expectations, and I'm glad I did, because there's no way. I mean, I'm just overjoyed right now. My heart's full.
Thank you so much for listening to What God Has Done With My Pain. As always, a huge shout out to Lazuli for her song No Greater Love that has helped make this podcast come to life. You can find her on Spotify and Instagram at Lazuli PROJ and at We The New Breed, where you'll find artists using their gifts to glorify God. Swing by at What Way This Way on Instagram to catch some behind the scenes snippets. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss a single interview. In the meantime, I would love to hear from you on social media or email. Until the next episode.